Hello and welcome to Gone Phishing, a podcast from the North East Business Resilience Centre, aka the NEBRC, focusing on all things cyber related. Our aim is to help raise awareness and understanding among business audiences, supporting them to be better prepared and protected from the growing issue of cybercrime and fraud. I'm Rebecca Chapman, Director of the NEBRC and a Superintendent at South Yorkshire Police, with nearly 30 years policing experience across uniform and CID. And today I am more than delighted to be speaking to Liz Murray. Liz is a Global Security and Awareness Lead, Information Security and Chair of our NEBRC Comms Group. Hello, welcome Liz. Thank you so much for joining us.
Nice to be here, Becky.
Okay, so just tell me a little bit about your background, Liz, and what you're doing at the moment.
So at the moment, I'm at FNZ, which is a wealth management company. We're a growing firm and we have a requirement, as everybody in financial services does, and actually as all firms ought to have our people know how to keep themselves safe online, both from a perspective of keeping our data safe, but also keeping their own information and their own money safe as well. So I basically do all the comms for how that happens. I would say operationalize policy. You know, you have all these great big policies that have lots and lots of really quite opaque language. I turn it into language that people can understand so that they can go, oh, to do that, I need to set a strong password, for example. You know, so that's basically what I do day in, day out. And I'm responsible for the training, the InfoSec training globally as well.
So Liz, I know that you have a really interesting background in the armed forces. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did there and how you ended up in cybersecurity?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a slightly unusual career path. I spent 10 years in the RAF, initially as an air traffic controller and doing some battle space management, working with the Army. I then did a job where I created airfields out of nothing all the way around the world, which was phenomenal. And then I transferred to the Army and I went into the air defence role. So I went from keeping aircraft apart to trying to shoot them down-ish. That would have been the thing had we ever been called to do it. Actually, what we did was keep people safe on the ground. And then I moved from there to a synthetic training facility. I spent quite a long time working in there. It was really cool, actually. We're responsible for teaching people how to think about what they should do. So can they do the action they want to do? Should they do the action they want to do? But an awful lot of security involved in that as well. And whether the information that we had was secure and everything else. And then I started to come to leave. And as with everything, you start resettlement. And I started looking around and I said, not cyber, not a bank. And I ended up going to, on an off chance, I went to a morning at HSBC to one of their, it was a veterans event, and ended up chatting to the lady that became my boss and probably, I would say, initial mentor into civilian life. And she basically, we had a chat and we realised that all the stuff I'd done had a real leaning towards security, and my security paranoia about the assumption that someone is always out to get you sometime and having to keep yourself secure lends itself really nicely into cyber security and information security. And so I joined HSBC in the cyber security function, not intending to, not at all, and I absolutely love it. It really plays to my strengths. Yeah.
And do you help other veterans resettle into jobs like that?
I'm a member of quite a few different groups on LinkedIn, and I'll always, if someone contacts me, I'll always respond to them and give them some great pointers, because I had so much help. There's so many great people out there who will take an hour just to give you a load of top tips about how to do it. And I was really lucky. I met a couple of really amazing people who spent some really quality time giving me great do's, great don'ts, and I took some of them. I didn't take all of them because they didn't all meet my personality, but absolutely, and so grateful to that. So I always repay that because it's a pay it forward thing.
So in the biog that you sent over to us prior to the podcasts, you described your role as the Babelfish who translates cybersecurity risks, threats and protective technologies into a language that everyone can understand. How do you do that?
Okay, I probably ought to describe Babelfish as well to start with. Babelfish is from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the Babelfish is something you can put in your ear and translate any language into your own language. So you pop the Babelfish in and it automatically translates whatever anybody's saying. So in that case, alien language. Actually, for most people, cybersecurity, information security is alien language, because the terminology is so complex, it doesn't mean anything in real life. So what we need to do is to turn something like multi-factor authentication, which is a mouthful at the best of times, into just another extra way to keep your information secure. It's the same as adding an extra lock on your door that is a different type to the rest of the locks that you have. And it's just basically analogizing. I story tell. I take the information that we have to have and I turn it into a story so that people can just have that moment of going, oh yeah, I get that now. And that came from, I used to, one of my jobs in the military was to do missile instruction, how the innards of a missile worked. I used to find that really tough because whilst my brain works partially on that kind of technical level, it's also very much half creative, and I had to turn it into pictures that I could understand in my head to be able to describe it so that I could then teach it and remember it, because that's what I was having to do. And that's what I do now. Is if I can't describe something technical in a way that my mum could understand, then I'm not doing my job. And that's what I do. I storytell.
That makes complete sense. So what do you think the biggest barriers are to better cybersecurity understanding?
I think people are frightened as soon as they hear the word cybersecurity. It's also assumed that it's not something that they can have any influence over, and also not something that they need to have any influence over because somebody else will do something. Of course, the drama with that is that you have hundreds of thousands of new pieces of ransomware, for example, being created every single year, and there's no way that people can keep tabs on that. The technology companies can't get over the brand new stuff all of the time. So we as people need to know how to keep ourselves secure. It's the same as crossing the road. To live in the 21st century, you've got to have a life skill of keeping yourself secure online. And that's everybody. But to do that, we need to distill it into stuff that's easy to understand. So I referenced the crossing the road. In the 50s, kids were getting killed because they ran out in front of cars that were a lot faster than they'd ever been before. The brakes weren't amazing, and they were big, clunky pieces of equipment, and people were getting killed. So we had the Green Cross Code came in, stop, look, listen. Actually, I would just love to see a stop, look, listen for cyber, so that people stop and they look at their emails to work out if it's real or if it's a phishing email. Is it a scam email? They just wait that couple of seconds so that their brain catches up with their emotion, because in it there's all this awful language about you've got to do this right now, and if you don't, you're going to be fined or you'll lose something. Just take that second. And that second of looking and really looking and thinking before taking the action, whether that's to cross and engage with it, or whether it's to stop, delete it and report it. And that's kind of where I'd really like to see us go.
So what do you think are the key influences and enablers to allow us to be able to do that?
I think we need to change the language around it to start with. I really do. I think changing the technical language that we use and turning it into something that people can understand is key. You hear, phishing, smishing, vishing. That's great. If I'm sitting there and I'm also dealing with a whole load of accountancy stuff, or I've got, I'm day to day, I'm hairdressing, or I'm just working with technical bits in a factory, they're just more phrases that I've got to understand. Actually, what do I want to know? I want to know that it's a confidence trick being played out on the telephone. I want to know that it's a text that's come in with a link that you shouldn't click. And I want to know that it's an email that I shouldn't be responding to because it's threatening me, and actually it's not real. It's about taking the language, making it less opaque, and that will enable people to actually understand and do something about it. I think if we turn it into stuff that people can understand, it reduces that friction of not understanding. And also, we need to help people understand it's everyone's responsibility. It isn't something that somebody else should do. We all have to take a role on with it.
So, and as that, obviously you're the chair of our NEBRC comms group, and it's about us getting our message out. So what role do you think that the NEBRC can play in making that language a lot more simpler?
I think there's come a really, really long way already in getting that information out there. Putting information in bite-sized chunks in social media platforms really helps. Turning it into something that is relevant to a specific industry really helps. So if we start to look at the education centre, put it in something that's relevant to that, and making it so that it flows and that it is simple and everything's explained. And I really like that. It's the here's what the problem is, here's how you solve it, without getting into that deep technical information of using the terminology that just puts people off, frankly. So that's really great from the comms perspective. The emails are super. We have to be quite careful about email comms because people are overwhelmed with emails. We have to make sure that we're not just doing email comms, and that if we're linking to things, we're helping people understand what a secure link looks like, what a good link looks like, how to check that it's a real link, just all that background information as well.
So do you think that the NEBRC should, remain in that kind of local focus rather than a national focus because it's specific to the region? Or do you think that there's room for just a national company to...
I think it's key to have local a local resilience centre. And the reason for that is that if I'm living in the Northeast and I call the police, I will call my local police force or service. Actually, if I'm suddenly getting into what I feel to be a national domain, I suddenly feel like I'm in a queue. I'm not being listened to. They won't know what challenges I've got. And also they won't know who to link me to locally. It might be that there's a great local firm who can help me to protect myself. Actually, if I just feel like I'm being put into a pot with the same as everybody else, that can prove really alienating. I think it's also, it's a tricky one, because cyber's global. And we're trying to distill that global threat down to something local, but that's the right thing to do because you provide that trusted face. And I really think people being trusted is a really key way forward. And if you can turn around and say, I served for this many years with that police service, and hey, we're giving you this information to help make your business more resilient, that's somebody that can be trusted. It's a trusted face and a trusted organisation. There is a need for it to link into a national organisation, primarily because that then provides that overwatch for the whole of the country, and you get the benefit of the scale of that national coming into the local, and you get to use the scale up ability and also get hold of all of the really, really great government initiatives to pull down into it.
So how do you think that the NEBRC fits with the local companies? So we have obviously trusted partners that we refer work to once the students have finished, and we also link into the clusters. There's one in the North East and there's one in Yorkshire and Humber. How do you think that the NEBRC fits with those?
I think really well, actually. Being able to go in as an umbrella over the top of things like the clusters and pulling those in and going into the business organisations and being able to deliver a message at a board level with them that then goes down to their members is really key. Being able to give local people to be able to go into a business and help them and have that chat face to face, because we're all very used to remote working, which is fine, but remotely is almost not trusted as much as people going in, particularly to small and medium-sized enterprises. I don't want to feel like I'm hanging on the telephone to somebody who's national. I want a trusted partner who might go, do you know what, I'll pop down, let's have a chat. And similarly, being able to go to the business clusters and have that chat in person to a group of people who all then tell somebody else as well. That's a really great way of passing a message.
Okay, so I always liken it to, there's a section of society that isn't quite listening yet, doesn't really know what they don't know, and we're kind of there to waken them up and then pass them on to the trusted partners when they're ready to go. Would you kind of agree with that analogy?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really key part of it is trying to pass a message across to a whole load of people who don't think it applies to them because they're not large enough. And the really key thing with this is every single part of an organisation. So I'm just going to drop back a little bit. There was a great quote on LinkedIn the other week that says, every organisation is a cyber organisation. We are all cyber people. And the reason for that is we all bank online in some way, shape or form. We all do something online, even if that's only taking payment. Anybody that's got a card machine that links to the internet is a cyber organisation. And yet most of them wouldn't consider themselves to have extra protection to do that, whereas they really need to. So because they don't know that that's what they need and that they are at risk, you really need that ability to just delve in and get hold of that element where they really don't know what they don't know to your words. So in that, for me, it's being able to grab a hold of people who are working singly and help them to build their protection up, because they're all third parties or fourth parties to larger organisations. I might be the hairdresser who's just taken a payment, but actually I might then send a whole load of emails out to someone, and it hits they might have given me their work email address because that suits them. Now that's fine. That might be because they are also a small and medium-sized enterprise. They've got their work email address, and suddenly I've been phished. I send something onto them that arrives with them. So that third party, fourth party element of being linked, they need to know how to protect. And when we start moving further up the chain, and you start getting to the banks very much financial services are very much regulated, and the regulator is looking more and more at the third and fourth parties. So it might be the chauffeuring company who's taking the organisation's bosses to the airport, because there will be maybe a contract in place for taxis or cars or whatever for their staff or for visitors. That is someone that definitely needs to be protected, or needs to know how to protect. They wouldn't see themselves as a cyber third or fourth party to that organisation, and yet they are. So we need to help them know how to keep themselves safe, so that we build the resilience of the country as a whole.
So if you had 30 seconds, and you have it now, and it might not be as long as 30 seconds, what advice from your professional perspective would you give to businesses regarding cybersecurity?
I'd say get the basics right first. There's some really simple things you can do. Strong passwords on email accounts. Getting multi-factor authentication, that terrible phrase, that's the extra bit. It's the using a separate device to prove who you are. Getting that in place. That can really solve a lot of your problems, and making sure that those passwords are strong and separate to everything else that you do. Then, if you are an organisation, I would say go and take a look at the NEBRC site and really go and have a look. See what services suit you, and if you choose to take them forward, go. If it's the free one, great. Just go and get some advice. And if it's something more and you feel you can invest, go and do that as well. That's really the way forward. These organisations are there to help, so go and use them. But really, it's about getting the basics right first. And if you don't know and don't understand what the basics are, go and take a look at the NEBRC website, go and look at the National Cybersecurity website, and see what's sitting there to help you, because there's so much. It's a really simple thing to say, but it's also a really simple thing to do. A strong password on your accounts is probably the basic thing you can do, but you need to know what a strong passphrase looks like, how to create one, how to keep it secure. And so it's all the stuff that comes off the back of that. And so I really, get the basics right first, and go and ask for help if you don't know.
Brilliant. So in your professional opinion or personal opinion, do you think we'll have a cyber secure future?
We have to have a cyber secure future to function as we move forwards. Everything is moving online, whether that be controlling cars for the future. The aspiration to have driverless vehicles relies on the internet, and it relies on being able to get into connected devices so that you connect with the car in front, so that you don't hit it, all the rest of that. So we have to have a cyber resilient future, but to do that, everybody needs to know that they have a part to play. And that's difficult. It's difficult to reach everybody, especially when you consider that, there's large swathes of the globe that need to be brought into it who currently have none. More people have a mobile phone than can actually eat in this world. And so when you look at it, you've got to bring those people on board as well, because actually where you have to look to see where the threat is coming from. Well, the threat might be coming from someone who can make a lot of money in a country that isn't regulated in any way, shape or form. So we have to know how to keep people secure, and people have to know that they have to keep themselves resilient. It's a global thing. It is as important to the World Economic Forum as as pandemic and global warming. It sits there. It sits right up in their top three. And so if it's right up there in their top 3, it needs to be up there in our top 3 as well.
Indeed, indeed. Well, hopefully you will long continue to be the chair of our comms group, and we can get that message out to people from the NEBRC.
Fingers crossed, because I absolutely love it as well.
Yeah, well, we love having you, Liz, and it's been great to talk to you today. Thank you so much.
Hey, you're very welcome.